Hello and welcome to my video where I will show you an alternative way to add an inkjet printed image to your clay. In a previous video I've shown you how to transfer an inkjet image from an acetate sheet onto the clay, but the technique I'm going to show you now isn't image transfer. Instead, we're going to be embedding the paper image into the clay. What I did first was to search for a copyright and royalty free image which is free for personal use, and I simply found this by googling copyright free clip art. I found this sugar skull image which I will link to below, and I printed it onto a matte photo paper. It was just any old photo paper, the cheapest I could find actually, and I wanted a matte look rather than a gloss look. I've not used this technique with a gloss finish paper, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. So all I did was print it on high quality on my matte photo paper, and then I cut all the way around the edge so that there was no blank white border around the outside of the image. The best type of image to use for this is an enclosed image that has an outline around the outside. Because you're basically sticking the paper to the front of the clay, remember that all of the paper is going to be visible, so any blank white space you don't want, you'll need to cut out. You'll also need obviously all your normal clay working materials and tools. In this case I'm using an acrylic roller, some Fimo soft clay and a ceramic tile as my work surface. You'll obviously need an oven, and I'm going to be using some cling film too. The final thing you'll need, and in some ways the most important, is some liquid clay. In this case I'm using liquid Fimo because I'm using Fimo clay. And this is what's going to be used to stick the paper onto the clay and also add a protective layer on the outside. So now you have your cutout image, and then you take your liquid clay, or liquid Fimo in this case, and you add a layer onto the front of your image. You simply add enough liquid clay to enable you to spread it in a thin layer all over the front. So once you think you've added enough liquid clay, then just use your finger to spread it all over the front of the image. You want a thin layer, but you want all of the paper to be coated. You'll know it's been coated because it'll go smooth when you run your finger over it. If it's rough, then you haven't covered the paper. As soon as you've done that, remember to wash your hands thoroughly. Before you put this in the oven, it's a good idea to let the liquid clay settle for about 5 minutes by just leaving it out in room temperature. Then you need to bake it for 15 to 20 minutes at a temperature of up to 130 degrees centigrade. Once you've taken it out the oven and let it cool, your image should now have a lovely smooth plastic coating on the front of it. And it's this coating that's going to protect your image and protect the paper once it's stuck onto your clay. So the next step is to attach your image to some clay. To do this, you need to condition your clay well and then roll it out into an even thickness. I used a lollipop stick either side of my clay to get that even thickness. I used my acrylic roller to roll the clay, and I made sure that the finished clay was just a little bit bigger than my skull image. It doesn't need to be that much bigger than the skull, because I only want to add a narrow clay border around the edge of the image. And then we need to stick the image to the clay, and to do this we're going to use the liquid clay again. So I'm going to do exactly what I did before and add a thin layer of the liquid Fimo onto the back of my image. Again, you want to do this on some scrap paper to protect your work surface rather than directly on your work surface like me. So you just spread it out with your finger so it covers the whole of the back of the image, and all of the paper is now smooth. As soon as you've done that, make sure you wash your hands. Turn the skull over so it's right side up and stick it down onto your clay. Once it's in the right position, take a roller and roll over the top of the image to make sure all of the paper is in contact with the clay's surface, and also to embed the paper slightly into the clay. Try and roll from the middle outwards so that any excess liquid clay can come out at the edges. Use your finger to remove any excess liquid clay that does come out from under the image, and also clean your acrylic roller if any liquid clay gets onto that. Then once again wash your hands before going on to the next step. The next step being cutting out the skull shape. So I just take my little blade and cut all the way around the skull to leave a narrow clay border. Then remove the excess clay, which you can then use for a later project. And then I did a quick roll with the acrylic roller again to make sure the clay was still flat. I then took a piece of cling film and laid it over the top of the clay. You want to make sure that the cling film isn't wrinkled, because these wrinkles will transfer to your clay. I then take my finger and just rub around the edge of the clay just to make a nice rounded edge. You don't have to do this, I just like the rounded look more than the sharp edge look. You again add another layer of liquid Fimo, this time all over the front of your image and the clay. This is the last baking, so you want to follow the instructions for your particular clay. In my case, I'm going to bake it for about 30 minutes at 110 degrees centigrade. Once I've taken it out the oven and let it cool, this is what I am left with. It's an inkjet printed image embedded into a piece of clay. At this point you can use your normal finishing techniques such as sanding around the edges or adding a varnish to finish off. I only did this as an experiment really to see if it was possible, and I actually really like the result. It gives a nice smooth matte finish to the front, and it also adds a protective coating to the paper. You can then take this image and use it as an ornament, or maybe stick it onto a box to decorate it, or anything you want really. So this is just an alternative to the image transfer technique, which can be a little bit hit or miss. Whereas this technique actually uses the paper within the clay, so therefore you're not going to get those faded bits of the image where it didn't transfer properly, or any problems like that. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful, and I really hope you have fun trying this technique. Thank you very much for watching.